You're in collision now. Steering. Okay, bogies have jinked back at me again for the 5th time.
In the name of the Father,
Shoot! Oh, the fucking soul!
and of the Son,
Good kill, good kill! Hey, good kill.
and of the Holy
Ghost!
In the final years of World War II, as Easter was fast approaching, Lieutenant Vincent Appleby, a pilot, was planning on finally leaving the perilous European skies to go on military leave to see his wife and newborn son. Before his mission, he would begin the ritual writing to his wife. Though there were only 7 days in a week, he would at times write up to 8 letters for her. In his final letter to his wife and son, he wrote, "Gosh, honey, I'll be the happiest man in the world when this damn war is over, and I get to come home to you and James. So help me, I'm never gonna have you out of my sight again." He would not ever see his wife again. He would never see his son, and his son, the future poet James Tate, would never see him. Greetings, deadbeats. This is poetry taught poorly. I'm going to share the story of one of my personal favorite poems, The Lost Pilot, and how the death of James Tate's father created a hollowness within his family that would transform the ghost of his father into a tiny African god. So how did this great poem come into being? In what ways did his father's absence completely alter the trajectory of his family's life? A trajectory that would lead him into a life of shit stepfathers, depressed mothers, guns, gangs, and eventually to poetry.
On a mission over Saint-Nazaire, a fortress is attacked as she completes her bombing run. Hit fatally and engine smoking, the ship plummets down and crashes into the sea. A flaming comet.
Back home in the middle of the night, as if with some familial clairvoyance, Appleby's grandfather woke and said, "Vincent has been shot down over Germany." He woke the whole family and told them, and then waited alone the rest of the night for the telegram. On Lieutenant Vincent Appleby's 18th mission over Braunschweig, Germany, Lieutenant Vincent Appleby was shot in his B-17. All members of the B-17 crew were accounted for, some as bodies, some as prisoners of war, but he himself was never found. He was only 22 years old. After the war was won with an Allied victory, his family hardly had felt reason to celebrate. Though Lieutenant Appleby was gone, his presence would be felt day to day in James Tate and his mother's life. Sometimes at home, James Tate's mother would stop what she was doing, ironing or making cookies, and take his hand. She would walk out the front porch and sit down on the swing, and she'd say, "This is the day your father and I were married," or "This is your father's birthday," or "This is the day your father was shot down." You would have loved him. His father's name was spoken so often at the dinner table, it often seemed that he had just left the room. No one could believe his father was dead. The only way that James could visualize his father was through the photo albums of his parents as high school sweethearts and read the love letters they exchanged with each other. He would try to imagine his father's voice as he read these. When he stared at the pictures and read the letters at the same time, he could see his father's mouth move, and he was confident his father would find them, no matter if his father had forgotten his name, had forgotten where they lived. He would stumble on, and when they finally found each other, it would all come back to him, and they would tell him how long they had waited for this day. But this day never came.
I'm the one that's trying to hold this family together. Where are you?
Grieving! I'm just asking you, can I grieve in my way, please?
Because of the sense of enduring loss created by the death of James Tate's father, neither James nor his mother were able to be a proper family. James's mother, through her grief, could not be a mother, and James could not be a good son. And this is how James, in one of his poems, described how his family was like in the aftermath of his father's death.
For Mother on Father's Day. You never got to recline in the maternal tradition. I never let you. Fate, you call it, had other eyes, for neither of us ever had a counterpart in the way familial traditions go. I was your brother and you were my unhappy neighbor. I pitied you the way a mother pities her son's failure. I could never find the proper approach. I would have lent you sugar, Mother.
After 2 years of lonesome mourning and waiting, his mother finally began to get back into the dating pool, which led to an incredibly hectic family life. Now, James Tate's mother dated many people that would come in and out of his life.
Oh, don't hate me because I'm beautiful, nigga.
There were two stepfathers in James Tate's life that had a particularly traumatic impact on him. One being Joe Quincy, the other being Dick, who was unsurprisingly a dick. So James Tate's mother got married to this man named Joe Quincy in a matter of weeks. James had no idea about this man's existence. He only learned of him once the marriage was announced.
I don't know who's Joe. Who's Joe?
Now, Joe possibly had ties to criminal elements in Chicago, and one of his first acts as stepfather was to show James how to shoot a lamp out with his .38. Joe claimed that he had needed it for more than one occasion. Now, James could never confirm his ties to the Chicago mob, but Joe seemed to have a very unique set of knowledge. One of those facts being that a gun would leave a hole in a man's back as big as around a half-gallon can of peaches.
Yeah, we got word for that kind of odd in English. It's called suspicious.
Now with Joe, there was constant violence between him and his mother. One day at the age of 7, while hearing his stepfather and his mother arguing and hearing his mother screaming, let go, you're hurting me," he ran into his room to see his stepfather's forearm gushing with blood. While James called an ambulance, he saw his mother made sure to pick up the knife from the pool of blood and hide it in the back porch before attending to her husband's wounds. That night, she told James that his stepfather tried to kill himself because he was mad at her.
Sure.
James's mother and Joe lived together for some time after that incident, and they weren't much as married but mutually trapped. One night, James Tate's mother assisted with Joe's evasion from the police when he drove him to Detroit with James in tow and his stepfather laying low with a rug over him. Joe was later found and arrested by the police, and James never saw him again. For many years, he lived without knowing what happened to Joe until he finally asked his aunt. "Whatever happened to Joe?" he asked her. "He got the electric chair." "What for?" "Didn't you know, James? Joe killed his first wife." She would eventually settle down with another man who was equally, if not more abusive than Joe was, Dick. The fights between James's mother and Dick mounted in severity from year to year. James and his mother dreaded the holidays because they knew that meant that Dick would be home more than usual.
Why are you laughing for? What, Chris, why are you laughing for?
And that everything would be ruined by one of his arbitrary regimes. James's mother was afraid for her life perpetually, and James believed that Dick was capable of killing her. When James's mother and him were alone, they would talk about Dick. And when they talked about him, it was with a single-minded hatred. They would talk about murdering him quite casually, as healthy families do, and felt that they wouldn't do a day in prison since all their neighbors and friends knew Dick's reputation. After a particularly bad fight, Dick beat his mother for 15 minutes while James watched. James went to the dresser and got his stepfather's gun, a .25 automatic, and pointed it at his head and yelled, "Get out!" They would file a restraining order against Dick, which he would routinely break and harass James' mother, one time standing above her bed in the middle of the night, and the constant stress led to his mother driving drunk one night, ending in a flaming crash, where all officers on the scene initially thought she had died. Though James Tate did love his mother and the myth and memory of his father, he couldn't help but feel a sense that both of his parents had failed to be with him in some way, and that influenced his beliefs on what it meant to grow up and what it meant to be a child. Let's look at a poem that showcases his view on childhood and parenthood and answers the question of where do babies come from?
This is called Where Babies Come From. Many are from the Maldives, southwest of India, and must begin collecting shells almost immediately. Their larger ones may prefer coconuts. Survivors move from island to island, hopping over one another and never looking back. After the typhoons have had their pick and the birds of prey have finished with theirs, the remaining few must build boats. And in this, of course, they can have no experience. They build their boats of palm leaves and vines. Once the work is completed, they lie down, thoroughly exhausted and confused, and a huge wave washes them out to sea, and that is the last they see of one another again. In their dreams, Mama and Papa are standing on the shore for what seems like an eternity, and it is almost always the wrong shore.
So in this poem, James Tate is comparing us growing up to the perilous life of baby sea turtles going out to shore. And if you know anything about baby sea turtles, when they're born, they are born into a kill zone. It is like the reverse storming of the beaches of Normandy for all these sad little turtles.
This is D-Day.
Also, if you know anything about baby turtles' mothers and fathers, they essentially smash, give birth to some eggs, and F off, leaving the baby turtles to entirely fend for themselves. And the baby turtles that are crawling, getting eaten, trying to make it to shore, once they make it to shore, they are now in a greater world of struggle and hardship in the ocean, living independently and figuring things out themselves.
And today, I'm going to show you how you can make this really cool boat.
Kinda like us, when we gain sentience, and we're like, holy shit, I am in this bitch, and now I gotta figure out what I'm gonna make of myself, what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna live. And getting all that stuff without knowing what you're doing is very intimidating, like it is for these turtles going into the ocean. Anyway, what I think is interesting about this poem, that when the baby turtle child grows up and begins building the boat, they imagine their parents waiting for them on a shore, but that those parents are waiting on the wrong shore. Where are they? I think for most of us, at least initially, we believe that our parents are trying to do right by us. They are trying to do their best for us. But sometimes, and even often, our parents are unable to reach us where we need them to reach us. They might be incapable of providing us a certain need that we really require. Like, here's an example I'll give from my life. For a brief period of time, I was actually terrified of my father. In his view, his way of raising me was like, oh, I'm toughening up my son because the world can be cruel and uncaring, and I'm gonna make him strong. Well, at that moment in my life, I didn't need that. Though my father was trying his best to raise me, in his mind, he was doing a good deed. It wasn't what I needed, and it was probably to the detriment of myself. I think this is possibly what the poem is representing. We may want our parents to provide to us in some way, shape, or form, but they just can't. You can easily see how James Tate's mother applies to this. She probably did love her son, but the grief and trauma of losing her husband so early and so young probably made it difficult to overcome. At the same time, James Tate was in a high school gang called the Zoo Club, where everyone had nicknames after animals, bugs, and insects, one guy being named Squid. And though they weren't like a super hard gang like the Bloods or the Crips, they were semi-hard. Think West Side Story over the Italian mob. They all had weapons, and some of the members had pistols. And the leader of the gang even stole a rifle from a police car, but they never used them. So just imagine a bunch of wisecracking kids going to drive-ins, talking to girls, and staying strapped. And that was what mostly interested James Tate in his youth.
Then suddenly, an accident.
However, in a weird, twisted way, James Tate's father was able to provide for his son through his death. The government-sponsored DEA program, not the narcs at the Drug Enforcement Agency, allowed James Tate to go to college, and in college, he began to write poetry. After graduation, James Tate drove to Iowa City, where he went to the university's poetry director, Donald Justice, presented his poems, and Donald Justice accepted him on the spot.
Bro, I knew I liked you, dude. Come here, bring it in. Bring it in, brother.
Mr. Boss, that's nice. In that writing program, he produced the poem, The Lost Pilot, a poem that he wrote for the memory of his lost father.
Poem I wrote in 1965 called The Lost Pilot. At the time that I wrote it, I was in the process of becoming older than my father, and since my father's body had not been found, and since I've thought of him as preserved, and I thought of myself as passing him in some way, so I think some of that image transformed in the poem to something else.
The Lost Pilot. Your face did not rot like the others. The co-pilot, for example, I saw him yesterday. His face is corn mush. His wife and daughter, the poor ignorant people, stare as if he will compose soon. He was more wronged than Job. But your face did not rot like the others. It grew hard and dark like ebony. The features progressed in their distinction. If I could cajole you to come back for an evening, down from your compulsive orbiting, I would touch you, read your face as Dallas, your hoodlum gunner, now with the blistered eyes, reads his Braille editions. I would touch your face as a disinterested scholar touches an original page. However frightening, I would discover you, and I would not turn you in. I would not make you face your wife, or Dallas, or the co-pilot, Jim. You could return to your crazy orbiting, and I would not try to understand what it means to you. All I know is this. When I see you, as I have seen you at least once every year of my life, spin across the wilds of the sky like a tiny African god, I feel dead. I feel as if I were the residue of a stranger's life, that I should pursue you. My head cocked toward the sky, I cannot get off the ground, and you, passing over again, fast, perfect, and unwilling to tell me that you were doing well, or that it was mistake that placed you in that world and me in this, or that misfortune placed these worlds in us.
Even though this poem is about absence, one thing I truly love about this poem is that it makes me appreciate the relationships I have with my family. Yeah, there were times where I didn't have the greatest relationship with my father and others, but I was gifted an answer as to what a relationship with my family is like. All the good, all the bad. James Tate doesn't know and is forced to live in speculation and what-ifs and wonderings and all the anguish that it brings. One line that I always thought was kind of weird was James Tate calling his dad an African god. Like, James Tate, Missouri white man, is saying my dad is an African god. I just think it's a very fitting metaphor in that a tiny African god is something that's foreign to a Western person at least, powerful, but still not powerful enough compared to the greater forces in the world. You know, there's a hierarchy of gods. Like in Greek, you got an S tier quality god, you got Zeus. In the D tier, you got Aristeus, the god of beekeeping and cheese making. Now, James' father is a tiny African god. He doesn't even fit in the Western Greek pantheon. He is so far away, he's not even thought about from the Western culture perspective. He was able to do three things with this initially peculiar phrase. It shows a great depth of separation between the speaker and his father. It also highlights the foreignness and strangeness of his father. And also it highlights the power and powerlessness of James Tate's father. So it's a very fitting metaphor to call your absentee dad a tiny African god. And one thing I love about the last couple lines is the play with scale. That it was mistake that placed you in that world, and me in this. Or that misfortune placed these worlds in us. Right? I want you to imagine here. James is placed in this world, James's father is placed in this other world. But at the same time, there's this world of misfortune placed within them. Despite being in these opposite worlds, they are inhabiting the same world, and that world is misfortune and everything it brings. They are separated, yet together. They are in different worlds, but in the same. That's just such a beautiful play in the poem that I think just makes a perfect closer.
At long last, home base. The mission has been completely successful. but we paid the price in men and materiel.
Despite the absence of his father and seeing how twisted relationships can be from the many heartaches that was in James Tate's mother's life, it is a bit surprising and uplifting to know that James Tate survived. He was able to find a wife that loved him, and he was able to be, from what I can see, a good husband. And though he never had kids, which might not be surprising, I want to say that he still acted as a father to many future poets, as teacher, and with his work. And in James Tate's search for meaning and happiness from this initial absence, he actually was able to locate the body of his father buried in a gravesite in Belgium, providing some sense of closure to him. So know that even in absence, something may still be found. Thank you for watching Poetry Taught Poorly. If you like what you saw, please consider liking and subscribing. I hope you guys are doing well. Happy holidays. I know that's already passed, but all that jazz. Do great out there, do great things, and be safe, take care of yourselves, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think you are?
I don't know. A 6.
I think you're a 3.